Ladies and gentlemen, we would now like to present to you and formally introduce Bob, Cos, and Arthur, the Play No Games podcast.
It's your favorite podcast. When we talk about real life and exchange a few laughs, we sticking to our path. When you find understanding, just know that that will never last. We ain't here to play no games.
What's up, you guys? What's poppin'? It's Cartier Bob. And this is our latest installment of the Play No Games podcast. But before we get started, like, comment, subscribe is so easy to do. But if we have any bounty or have put any smiles on your face, donations. Not for me, but what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create and build with my friends. $ Hero Bob. It'll be up here or down here. However, I decide to edit it because sometimes I don't know what I want to do. But before we get to our very first segment, we have a very special guest. When I talk about humble and a person who's trying to understand the chaos when in life we can feel lost, but actually when we're lost, we're found. We have Marisa on the podcast today.
It's so good to be here. I'm like really happy this is happening. I feel like we talked about it for so long and
Well, I'll just say this just very briefly because I know after we do our very first segment, we'll have questions and we'll talk more about you and what you're about. But yeah, I really appreciate our conversations like just as creators and like just like where you're trying to go and like what you're doing, and like your story is so beautiful. It just has to be shared.
Welcome to the Play No Game segment. It could be positive, negative, informative. It could be anything about your day. All you have to say is I'm ready to play no games about this. We're going to pass it off to 5 Take Rob. And,
disrespectful.
It's the 25 name change, so we just had to, make sure we put that out there.
So what I'm actually playing no games about is something that I stumbled upon doom scrolling. Sometimes social media has its pros and its cons, but I actually found this young entrepreneur and just brainiac, Zia Ice, 14-year-old, and she creates a watch that detects signs of strokes. So I want to play no games about just like the excellence of just children and excellence of young black women just in general, where it's kind of like, I hope whenever I have children that I don't say they have to do something like Zia, which is great, but also just like have that community mindset of like, I want to build or create something that helps people. So that's just super dope.
Super dope.
So
I was like, I want to know more about that.
Oh.
Yeah, like what?
Okay, I got you.
Yeah,
I got you. Zia Ice from New Orleans has crafted an innovative device aimed at detecting early signs of a stroke. Her creation, named the Wingit, is a wristwatch equipped with sensors that measure heartbeats and nerve impulses, enabling it to pick up on subtle indicators of a stroke in adults, according to the educational news outlet, the 74. Zia's ingenuity has not gone unnoticed as she joins the ranks of 126 students selected as champions in the National Stem Cell Challenge presented by the U.S. Department of Education, the Explore competition. So,
I want to know, like, how did she get into this? Like, what inspired her to get into this? That's what I want to know. I want to know the backstory.
I just think sometimes, like, someone told me this before, where you walk around with a notepad and a pen, and when something frustrates you, you write it down. And after you get through the emotions of the frustration, if you have a feeling or urge of wanting to solve that rather than to be frustrated about it, that's your calling.
Interesting.
Solve the problem rather than to be frustrated about it. Like, I'm so frustrated, I want to make sure that no one else is inconvenienced by this.
Wow.
That's deep. That's super deep.
But that's just how my brain works. I'm just a guy in the chair. So Marissa, I'm curious. What are you playing no games about?
Well, yeah, I'm like, I think lately I've been playing no games about taking walks. Honestly, like it's such a everyday thing, but you don't think to do it. Like I work a lot at home, and I was saying to you earlier, I was like getting very caught up in here.
Yeah.
And you're like working at your little place in your little home, right? And you're getting caught up in here, and it's like you just gotta move sometimes to get like all that energy out. And just like the simplicity of like walking around, just appreciating what's around you, even if it's just like taking my dog for a walk or something. Maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I've been liking like walking at night, just like walking around at night, getting a little high, like just like getting that like little sensory experience on top of it all, and just like, just kind of being and enjoying that for what it is.
I'm gonna be honest.
Is that weird?
No. How? Wait. Maybe because I'm a guy, I just don't hear that often come out of a woman's mouth, being like, "I like walking alone at night."
It's like around the corner and back, but it's like a very small, compartmentalized experience. But it's like it gets me out of the house. Just feels nice to have like the cool air on me. There was one thing like that I thought was interesting when I moved here after living on the East Coast in all these like lit cities, and then coming here and there's like no street lamps on a lot of the residential areas, so you're like walking around and you're like, wow, this is like really dark. Like I'm kind of like uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the discomfort comes in for me. I'm just like, oh, I don't like the feeling of this, of not being able to see things. But I've found like weirdly, I found comfort in that. I don't know what that is. I can't explain
I think
it.
one of the big unique things, because since my move to LA, they have street lights everywhere. Half the time they don't work, but
Yeah.
it's very like bogged down, and so like being able to be comfortable in a space where like you can see the stars, and if the moon is bright and it's clear, it feels really lit almost, and it allows you to kind of like relax and have peace walking at night. Because sometimes I used to find comfort walking at night just because it's quiet. There's not cars and all the other stuff going on, but if it's a full moon, it's well lit. You can see. You don't need this extra street lights. It kind of just you're allowed like that comfort in the quietness too as well.
Yeah, there's this like connection to nature that's happening as well.
A little bit deeper, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I respect that. That's super
Really
dope.
cool. Yeah.
Well, I ain't playing no games about. Dang, I had it too, lost it. Something more positive. I think we have to recognize the small wins. Yeah. So I'm playing no games about small wins. And, I was told by someone, like, sometimes we lose ourselves in our frustrations and not recognize the path that we've continued to walk on. And for me, that was, like, really deep, because we don't celebrate the small stuff sometimes, especially when we're getting caught up in the big picture. And so just being able to track yourself, I think it's important, and recognize that, like, those small wins will lead up to something bigger if you acknowledge those, celebrate those as if you would celebrate the big win. So yeah, celebrating the small wins. Let's get it.
I'm glad that you said that, because I've made a different shift when it comes to, or when it came to just what I do outside of work, where I'm trying to find my community. I'm posting for my community. I'm posting for the people that get something from what we do here in that manner, where even if it's a small thing, where my mindset has always been, if I get one view, that's enough. Even though I know behind the scenes y'all hear me talking about, oh, numbers this, number that, but it's also, I have that mindset of like, if one person digests this and they're waiting for it, then I'm doing the work. Where I know, what do you call it? All the little achievements sometimes on YouTube are like, oh, you've gotten 5 replays, even though it's insignificant. I'm like, oh shit, I got 5 replays.
Dopamine hit.
Where I'm like, and I just want to share that, where I think so many people wait for, oh, I gotta have this. It's got to be recognized by this, rather than, no, I'm recognizing this because I think this is dope because 5 people or 2 people or 1 people. So I appreciate you saying that.
Mm-hmm.
What were some just like smaller ones for you lately?
Ooh, I think a big one is just like USA trip or this USA rugby stuff. I feel like I don't acknowledge it enough. And it was funny because I was in Tijuana and one of my teammates was like, he's like, you need to brag about it a little bit, like boast on it yourself a little bit. And I was like, that's something I really don't do. I'm not a boastful person. I've never really been a boastful person. But not only that, I coach a 3rd and 4th grade basketball team, and seeing their progress get better at basketball for me was a small win because a lot of girls had never played before. This was a new team. We didn't get what we wanted, but I think celebrating the progress that they made for me was a lot bigger in that process. Also, I started a cooking class at the school, and I'm coming up with the whole curriculum, the whole everything, and just that acknowledgement in that aspect for me is like a small victory, because it's something that I'm passionate about and something that I wanted to do, and it's happening, and it starts when I come back. So like being able to accept that and recognize like there's some victories that are coming out of the work that I'm doing, and just have to pay attention, and not get caught up in the big picture and in the small ruffles of things, and when something's not going exactly how I want it to, just recognize there's some other things that are going well. So
yeah, that's a huge thing, like just trying to find, we were talking about that before too, yeah. Right? It's like, how do you find the light in the darkness, mm-hmm. when everything feels so big, so like heavy? Mm-hmm. How do you then focus on like, okay, what are those small wins? Like, what are the little things, the little nuggets of joy that are like, that I could really like look forward to, and ladders up to the bigger picture, the true absolutely. Intention that you're looking for, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's huge. I feel like that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately too. Just like, how do you find those small moments?
Stepping stones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think this leads us into our first question. I want you to give the people a little bit more about yourself.
So, do you want like what I'm up to right now?
Play no games version.
Yeah, so I am a senior brand designer.
Okay.
I was working an agency job last year, was laid off, and now on this new path to finding creative freedom for myself, as a solopreneur, trying to figure out my business, trying to figure out who are the people I want to build relationships with, like what clients really light me up, who do I connect with, and so it's really about like building that from the ground up. But it really took me a while to like get to where I'm at now. Like it took like probably about a year. I'm still kind of going through like the grieving process and the change that I experience, not just from that experience, but like just throughout the year. There are a lot of different shifts personally for me. And so it's just about trying to move through that, trying to feel, but then trying to find those, like what we were saying before, like those little nuggets of like, okay, here are the like little things that show that I'm like getting to where I'm trying to go. And so, yeah, I've just been trying to focus on building that up and building a sense of community. I moved here like 4 years ago, and like even still, I'm learning my way around. I'm like trying to figure out who are the communities of people or like the types of activities I like to share experiences around. So yeah, it's just been a lot of like, just like my eyes are wide. It's like, I've never owned a business before. And so it's a lot of like just talking to people, asking questions, just getting myself in a room with those people, getting on a call with those people. It's a lot. It's a lot of outreach. It's a lot of like putting yourself out there because you are your own brand. Like you don't have the comfort of like being like, okay, I'm on a team here. Like, yeah, I want to contribute to the broader vision of the team, but now it's like, oh, well, this is like all of that responsibility is on me now, and I get to choose what to do with it, which is kind of amazing. Like it's just like really freeing, but it's also like
A lot.
what the fuck am I doing half of the time, and just like kind of like getting messy with it and being like, today like that didn't go where I thought it would, but like also that was kind of cool. Like I learned these things along the way, and that was amazing in itself, and just like trying to appreciate just the journey of like knowing you're moving towards something, like because of like the energy that I'm putting into it, the energy that I'm bringing, and like bringing an intentionality even to what it is that I want to do with my business is a huge thing for me, and that only just started to happen this year.
Yeah. You said something that was very very interesting that we definitely can get like a lot of mileage out of, but like when we talk about westernized culture and just people who live in America, the big two words that scare people: laid off. And I don't think we have enough literature or just like talking about what happens when people go through layoffs and the I'll just say the identity you lose, because, and obviously you don't have to say where you worked, but what was it like going through being told you're being laid off?
It was, for me, I felt very blindsided, but there was something energetically. I'm a very like energy driven person. I don't know if y'all can relate, but I'm like, I know when something's weird. I can sense it as a highly sensitive person.
Okay. Are you tapped in?
Yeah. That's what we're doing. But yeah, like I knew something was weird, and there are a couple things that happened over the course of that time, and surely enough, that happens. The words came out and they pierced the air, and it was just like, oh shit. And it's interesting because like you put so much of like your value and your purpose tied into what you're doing, because I think as creatives, like it is very emotional for us. It is like what we're doing for most of the day. We're in the business of like,
Something.
yeah, and like working with people, making sure that like everyone's understanding each other, everyone's like on the same team, and then like being removed from that and being like, well, that's not what my day is gonna look like anymore. I think that was the hardest part, was just like the shift of like the routine to like now not knowing what that routine's gonna be, and being like, well, now what do I do? It's a blank canvas. And it's funny because it's like when we're making something as creatives, it's like we always work with blank canvases, right? It's like that's what we're like kind of trained to do, to like navigate the ambiguity. But somehow when it becomes intertwined with like our identity and like what we see as our purpose, which is like our craft, our work that we're tied to, it just like creates a whole different experience. So it was just a lot of like, you know, kind of going through sadness, loss, grief, more in that like, you know, change is hard. But I think over time going through that started to like appreciate some things about that. Like I hadn't really taken time for myself in the past. Honestly, like I've been working like every summer. I was just talking about this at the front. I was like, I've been working every summer since like high school. I've been taking internships, I've been taking jobs, and I never have truly given myself the permission and time to take a break, like an actual break. Like, you know, like the one where like you come back and people are like, wow, you are just positively glowing. And you're like,
got your energy back, huh?
Like, I haven't had that experience, that like reset for myself. And so it allowed me this, like the space in a way was a gift to like just kind of sit with that and to be like, okay, now what? Like, there's so many different ways I can go. I thought about a career change. I thought about like really leaning hard into like building some sort of food experience, which I do a little bit of that now, which I can get into later. But yeah, it was just it opened a world of possibilities for me.
No, I was really glad that you that you talk about that, because I don't think we talk about that enough, especially let's just say in this town, you know, not outing her. She doesn't do all the example I'm using is not where she was working. So, anyway, or it's like the identity of Portland is I work at Nike. Nike's everything. No bad blood for anyone who works or do anything like that. But I know Nike just had those big layoffs, and just thinking how many people lose themselves of like, I got the check, rather than, you know, maybe you've been with the strikes, but it's, but it's like, I'm just so glad that you're speaking on that, because there's so many people who layoff means it's the end, and they think it's the end of something when it actually could be the start of something beautiful. But
I think that's a huge kind of thing into what I was thinking. You said something that made me resonate really well. It's now what?
Yeah.
Like people in things and think of, okay, well, instead of now what? Now what's next? What's coming? What can I do? And I think that now what is almost like fuel to go into your passion, to go into more creative spaces, to go into things that you probably wouldn't have never done if you sat in this office for 25 plus years and retired from them. And don't get me wrong, maybe, but there's no now what. Now I can kind of channel myself in this process and say, now what? What am I going to do now?
Right.
Which I think is a powerful statement. Ultimately, I think it's a really powerful statement because you're challenging yourself.
Been just like arriving at the now what. Like there's that space even just before too, where you're like, I kind of need to embrace the discomfort in a way, and that like we don't want to be uncomfortable, right? We want comfort. We want things that feel safe. And so now it's like, okay, this is very uncomfortable, but I don't really have a choice. So I think, but I do have a choice. And like, will I choose to do something? Like, how do I turn that into something for myself?
Yeah.
I think there's like a point, like I've been thinking a lot about, like, been doing a lot of therapy, just like mind, body, experiences, and just like kind of tuning into the body and what it's telling us, and like slowing down and being like, oh, that's uncomfortable. Where does that like show up? And just like kind of sitting with that and acknowledging it, just noticing it for what it is. I mean, you probably know all about that, but yeah, it's like just the simplicity of like really tuning into that before like getting into the now, like let's get into the plan and like figuring out like what I'm gonna do with that energy. Like that's the hardest transition, because like you could just keep going and just like totally. I think it's like you need to get uncomfortable with yourself a little bit before you can get comfortable again.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
Okay. We're gonna spice up just a little bit. So, you don't have to say your thoughts before you left. I'm not trying to say you were wishing on a company's downfall, but how you gonna let me go? I'm the best part of what y'all doing. But it kind of leads me to one of my questions I really have for you is, because you talked so much about creativity and being creative, is working at the top or the creme de la creme of type of Fortune 500 companies. Do you feel like working in those areas rob creators more of their creativity, being that high and being under those guidelines?
Like you're saying, like, oh, do you think that limited creativity?
Since you're out now, then you're more just you.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if it limited creativity necessarily. Like, I think it's just harder to move through a process because there are so many layers of just, there's people, there's processes, and I'm thinking about like these like bigger companies, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so they kind of have to pass through all those like different teams and different decision makers, and so like, yeah, like sometimes that.
Educate us. I think that's a gem. Educate us.
Yeah.
To get something out, how many teams does it have to pass through to get something out? Because you producing something on your own is boom.
Yeah.
But like, what are the measures?
Right?
What are the measures to get something out that high?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you have to pass it through the creative leadership team. You have to pass it through like any other stakeholders is what they call them.
No,
stakeholders.
Learn something, guys.
Which is just like people who are all kind of contributing to like whatever that project is or that like business idea. Yeah, like the account managers, the business leads, like the people who are kind of bringing in the work, right? Yeah. And then there's also like
so many hands.
There's like the financial team and like lawyers too on like around what you can or can't say. That's been a thing too. Like it's just everyone wants to make sure, like when you're in something that big, I think sometimes there is a lot of not censorship, but like want to like convey yourself in a certain way. It's like, this is bigger, and so we want more consistency, we want a unified message, so the processes and the structures feel a little bit more present like based on my experience with it, whereas like in a smaller setting, like it's a little bit more fluid. You're maybe not like, might even be interacting with like the CEO or the startup, the founder on the other end, which is just a very different process, but it's just like less voices to go through, and it just looks a little different. That's all. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was like,
no. I would just think the origin of the question comes from really just, I see how you're making a shift from working with more like smaller mom and pop businesses and really helping them understand how to get their voice out and to, maximize what they're doing. And let's just say, just from like the people I know, just some of the things that do get censored because they're trying to convey this one thing, and just why is a person financial team telling me about this creative thing that I know I went to school for, and you're just looking at the budget. So you're coming at it from a budget angle rather than I know people are going to digest that. So I've always been like, might be too many cooks in the kitchen when you're, being a creative. But so that's where that came from. So I was just like, I'm curious. I want to ask a guru about it.
And they're all valid goals. Like when you're working in something that like systemically big, it's like they all inform each other. It's just about how do we then like, we have to work extra hard to understand each other. Like, I think that is the thing at the end of the day, that no matter big, small, like I just want to understand, like, what are you trying to get done? What am I trying to get done? And just trying to find some common language in between. That's really what I care about. Like,
yeah, you hear that?
It's all feeding into each other somehow.
You hear that, Andrew and RJ? Ooh, we gotta come together. Commonality. I'm glad that you said that, because the critics in the back needed to hear that.
They shut the door.
So I think that's an interesting like perspective and like a question that you bring up in the sense of like a major company, everybody got to touch it. I got to touch that too. And then it almost becomes watered down to the actual creative idea that it started from. You initially wanted to bloom a rose and you get a stem, right? And I feel like when it comes to those big spaces, your voice almost gets trimmed out. So I think with Rob, other 17 names that he has,
Not gonna let you live that down.
I think he was kind of pinpointing more of the perspective of like, as the creative, how does that impact you as an individual standpoint? If I'm putting out my idea and they're like, nope. Then I come back to it, put it out again. Nope. Put it out again. And now it's this battle of what can I do to really be creative instead of freedom to be like, oh, this is the rose that I wanted. Yeah, there's a few different colors in here, but this is the rose, and the person's like, actually, I love that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So this sense of freedom to the sense of control and aspect for a creative person, it almost takes away from the creativity to be dimmed and be less than open.
Yeah, and it's like, I think we get very attached to what it is that we're making, right? It's like we have this experience, we went to school for it, so we have a perspective on it, and we want people to trust that what we're bringing to the table is like to be trusted.
Yeah.
But like when other people enter the conversation, immediately, like whatever that outcome is, whatever you think that is going to be in your mind and your process, it's never going to be that way. So it's like, in a way, you kind of have to find that like in between spot of like, I am passionate about this, I care, I'm invested, and I want to push for the right solution, but I also like need to find like a level of like, not detachment, but like I need to find a level of distance to be like, oh, this is gonna change. Like it's gonna keep changing. It might not be the outcome that I want it to be, but I'm gonna try my hardest to get it there. And trying to accept that it just might not go where you think it's gonna go. And I'm saying this out loud. I'm like, oh, that's funny. Like my whole lived experience. Like I was like, oh,
we don't play no games.
It's just like, oh, great. but yeah, it's it's like I'm not sure if I see it as like watering down. It's being interpreted differently. And I think it comes through in like the interactions, like more like, oh, does this person like trust me? Like, do they trust that like my vision or like what it is that I'm bringing to the table is actually of benefit and value to them? And I think that is the hardest thing get over. It's like the creativity will come if you can just like come to that like level of like, do we trust each other, or like can we like move forward in this weird process together.
So it's almost like it's more about the relationship than the design or creativity.
For me, yeah. Like personally, yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Because I would just say, because I see myself as a creative in a different way, where sometimes we spend so much, I want you to see it how I want you to see it. And to me, in my opinion, you maybe think a little differently of like how things, or how even today, even went with like the changing of the mics, the chords, all the things where we want this thing to happen. And then, that mutual relationship we all share. So I really appreciate you saying that because I think I will always forever stand on the side of, sometimes you have to just see it how other people want to create it. Where I know on the show we've kind of laughed about the soup can. I was like, why is that fine art? Like, that's just that's them. But how you explained it, where I like that, where it's the relationship, and I think that's sometimes where people get lost at, and that was like dope spin on it. I was like, all right, maybe maybe it's the relationship of the soup can I don't have with somebody. That's why Andy Warhol, it's great. But wait, is that right?
Who? Andy Warhol? Yeah.
He did soup can.
Oh, you got it.
Oh, great. Put me on Tuesday. Yeah. Put me on the what do you call what they do at the bar on Tuesdays? Jeopardy.
Oh my God.
That's put me on. Put me on it.
Goodness. So you talk about this relationship piece, and I think that's a huge kind of facet that we touch into here. How does cultivating this relationship in marketing and design kind of impact your outside perspective of your relationships? So you talk about your work relationships. You have to be creative in this space, create for others, interpret the same thing you're trying to create. But then outside of that, you take a step outside of that, then you be creative in your own space and with your friends. How does that relationship interact with this other relationship or counteract?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like at the end of the day, like how I approach, like it's me, right? Like
Absolutely.
I'm gonna show up as me in either of those situations.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy for me to arrive at just even saying that for my professional life, because we talked about like stage fright and just like kind of getting over the fear of like public speaking and just like, ooh, I want to say the right thing. I don't want someone to perceive me as like wrong. But I think like where I'm at now and like the self-work that I've done, like those two existences like feel very similar. Like, cause like I'm a very inquisitive person by nature. Like I ask a lot of questions. I just like, I have a lot of information. And at the end of the day, like we just want to be seen. We want to be heard by other people. And I feel like a therapist sometimes in like the work that I do in my creative and personal life. Both of those are creative sometimes. But yeah, I think like I just always try to show up for people in both of those scenarios. And the creativity is just like a form of communicating with people, whether it's like having a shared activity. I think a lot of my friends happen to be creative because like I maybe gravitate to those types of people. Like they look to like creative processes when they're like processing something, like maybe they tap into music. I like music. And so it's like creative is kind of like a flow state for like moving through ambiguity or moving through a hard process, I find. So it's like regardless of whether it's like a professional context or a personal context, I see those as the same.
I'm about to turn up the heat now.
Yeah.
I'm about to turn up the heat. And one of the most interesting things about just getting caught up in read about some of the questions I wanted to ask you is people do a really good job, at least on social media, of hiding their flaws and hiding their scars. And one of the things that really like jumped out with me with like getting caught up and just seeing like who's going to be on the show is you talked about the hesitancy of you asking for help. And I want to see, and I want to really challenge you. When was that first time you really knew that you were hindering yourself by not asking for help?
I'm trying to think back to like, I was like, let's walk back like 6 months ago. What did that look like? What was I doing? I was definitely languishing a little bit, and like having that very, real fear of like, I don't really want to ask anyone for this. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to like, I really didn't want to like announce anything about like what happened to me. I think it ended is like, trying to think of like who inspired it to, like, I probably had a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about like social media in general and like how to be vulnerable on social media. And I have this like very skewed perspective of like, oh, like I don't want to be showy. And I'm like, well, literally what I do is meant to be shared. It's like meant to be shared. Yeah. It's meant to be talked about. It's meant to be interacted with. But here I am getting in the way of myself of like wanting to be vulnerable through social media, probably because like I'm afraid of being like perceived a certain way or being perceived as like, maybe that's the imposter syndrome coming through. Could be a series of different things, but I think what really changed my perspective, like the kind of like so what piece, like when I first started to like arrive at I want to do this, like I want to freelance by myself, start my own thing, and like actually lean into it with full intention. Like for me, that was, I took a creative freedom and marketing course with Bima Williams.
Oh, great dude.
Yeah.
So
and
I know him. I worked well with him. When I was doing my first podcast, he came on and I spoke to him and his wife, Kate.
Yeah. Lovely people. Just like
I had interviewed Kate's ice cream and pop-ups and stuff still. Kate is wonderful. Go check her out on Mississippi. That's now he's in LA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome. I'm like, it's such a small like world where I feel like you talk to someone and you're like, oh shoot, some cool.
Yeah. He's super cool.
But yeah, I decided to take a class with him because I didn't know how to get out of my own way, and in a way that was like me asking for help, like just asking for like a little bit of guidance and know how to like get to know myself, honestly. Like I think I was holding back a lot because I didn't know what I was doing and I was scared and I didn't know what it took to like actually build a business. And like part of that was actually like getting real with myself and being like, all right, like what is like the intentionality I want to bring to this? Like what do I want to focus on? What's my niche? Like who are my ideal clients? Like how do I want to promote myself? Like asking myself these like very real questions that are seemingly basic on the outside, but there's a lot of like strategy and thought that goes behind like even just putting out a post on Instagram and like really leaning into that and being okay with like, all right, where's the edge of like, this is like me oversharing or like me like not sharing enough and being inauthentic. Like where's that like authenticity sweet spot, I guess?
No. I'm so glad that you said that because I think that's the piece where I'm trying to focus in on, and I'm so glad you're just speaking to it, because when we get out of our own ways, I think there's like layers to it, and I think it's almost to me like the inverse of Dante's Inferno, where where like the first level is like, I acknowledge that this is going on, or maybe I'll not Dante's Inferno, I'll say stage of change, you know. But the reason why I'm saying Dante's Inferno is because there are so many different layers of how we get in our own way, and like it sometimes is a pitfall where I'll just speak more to myself, where I see myself as a captain. I'm leading things, but also there's a reason why you have a navigator. There's a reason why you have the shipwright. There's a reason why you have, the cook, where it's okay. Sometimes the cook's gonna make the decision, and then sometimes maybe the captain's job is just spotlighting the person who doesn't know that they're dope as shit. And I think that is like the levy that you have to really pull from. And I'm just really appreciative that you like talking about that, because I think every day when we wake up, that's where we have to check in of like, what do I need help with? Because the running the jewels and the farces, when we look at these larger companies, this or that, or just people, successful people in general, it's sometimes advertised that I'm self-made. Mm-hmm. And I gravitate more towards like, oh, I did this with a team.
Yes.
That's more realistic.
Exactly. Like yes, you should with like who you are authentically, but you should also stop and ask yourself, like, I love that, like asking yourself like, oh, what are my support systems already that I can tap into? I have friends, I have family, I have partners, I have just so many people in my network, like people I haven't talked to in years. I'm getting on calls with people I haven't talked to in like 7 years and being like, how are you actually doing? Like, just like outreaching to people and knowing that it's a safe space. Like, I think that's the hardest part, is just like opening the door and being like, I do need help. Like, I am struggling here. And then you realize like they're struggling too. It's like a very human experience. But then how do you talk about that outwardly? That is like, that is the obstacle, and still a funny dance.
For me, I feel like, because I feel like I'm in that space, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm in this space of trying to get myself out the way. And the door is like cracked open, and I peek my head out, but then I close the door back, right? And eventually, like, you're going to have to open the door and walk through it. Otherwise, you're going to stay behind the door where the people on the other side of the door is like their hand out like this. And, and so my biggest thing was pride. I think for me, and I think people always talk about get your pride out the way, get your pride out the way, get your pride out the way. But I think you said it. It's like, how do you take that internalization out of yourself and recognize that from being so long, like putting so much pressure on yourself to be able to be or do, right?
Yes.
And I think it's the challenge of stepping outside of that box. Like, okay, let me just step outside this box. Look at myself. All right, self, we're doing all right, but we could be doing better. Let's see how we get there. And it's like, you need help. Everybody needs help. At some point in their life, everybody needed help. Everybody got a hand from somebody to get them to where they are. Doesn't matter how many hands they get. Doesn't matter. Because if you get to where you want to be, you can. Someone told me, one of my teammates told me, they said, and it's big in the rugby culture, to help someone else is to help yourself, and pass that on. And then so it's this constant motion of, they're going to need help eventually, you're going to need help eventually, and you just keep passing that. And now it's a train of, at the end of the day, I know that the next person that I give this to is going to give it to somebody else. And that's the goal. And that's the whole purpose. And not looking at it as me versus me, because ultimately that's who it is. It's not you versus someone else. It's you versus you. And so, yeah.
And I would say this because I've said this on many shows, or I'm pretty sure people have heard me say this before, but I'm a Christian, and I think one of the things that loses people a lot from understanding from Christianity is not doing that. Where we're focused on so many people who's on damnation and things like that. My mindset's always like, God's gonna take care of that, and knowing the type of, let's just say, God that I serve, that everyone's gonna be taken care of. And I think when we just serve to just serve, like, I just want to help you because I just want to help you, I think that's how, like, truly, like, the world should actually be. No matter what someone expresses, race, creed, religion, sexuality, all the other things, we're just kind of like, if I just do good, because passing and paying that stuff forward just goes a long way. Because I think what a lot of people don't understand is we always point the finger at so many different things, or you could be doing this better, you could be doing this better. But it's like the act of, how can I make space and room to be with people I'm uncomfortable with, make space for people who don't know what they want, and all those different things, because everyone like seeks that perfection out of other people, but we don't hold ourselves to those standards. So it's just kind of like, sometimes, as both of you were speaking, it was on my heart, where it's like, I really wish people would just take their time with each other. Because nobody's perfect. I have my brain farts or brain laps because we all get tunnel vision or main character syndrome.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just the world and just people in general just be a better place if we just seek to understand. Yeah. And when I say seek to understand, so we can be in a space just to exist.
Yes.
Not so I am right, seek so we can both coexist.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to agree. You don't have to be the same. You can have very different. You can be cut from very different fabrics.
Of course.
And
it's free to be kind.
It's really That's it.
It's free to be kind.
That's it.
I wouldn't want my worst enemy to know that he's sitting. Do you need some help? Because I honestly think that's how we're supposed to go, and that also kind of just leads me into you are doing so many phenomenal things, and I'm gonna need your help. Okay, I'm gonna need your help because I struggle with pronunciation, how we say it. So you got a delicious ice cream pop up. Now I ain't gonna butcher it because I want the good people who watch this know how to say it. So we're gonna say it on 3.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Zia
Yes.
Now we can break up the last name, but
I was like, I didn't leave the descriptor in there. Let's start with the first word and move from there.
So please, educate our gamers, our people who are watching. You have an ice cream, delicious. Hopefully, we'll be tasting one of these days.
Yeah.
So please tell us, why did you get into the ice cream game?
Yeah. So it's called Zia's, which is aunt in Italian, like aunt, like not an ant. Someone asked, I had to clarify it because someone was like the bug, and I was like, oh, I didn't think about that, but yeah. And
English language.
Yeah. Understanding. I make pizzelle ice cream sandwiches. So a pizzelle is an Italian cookie. They usually show up at Italian American Christmas, holiday, any birthdays. You see them just scattered amongst mountains of cookies. Okay. And actually I started to make my aunt's recipe, which is kind of where the name derived from, as a little bit of an honor to her. But I started making pizzelle cookies when I was kind of going through the grieving process, and I was like, oh, I want familiar things. And I've always had this connection to food and cooking, and I even focus on my design business on food and beverage and wellness clients, because there's this connection to the table and wanting to understand someone completely different from you, like, but shared around this experience of eating something delicious. And so it's like, I've been making cookies. Yeah.
Nice. You talk about that because that's the podcast that was started. It's literally that what you described. It's food and culture podcast that was stemmed from sitting around the table talking about food.
Yes.
Don't say was.
Yeah.
It is. It is. It's still there. It's still there. Keep going. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. And my friend started making ice cream. Like, he was experimenting with ice cream in his home, and I had this idea of just like marrying the two together. Like, let's try that out. And it was, as expected, it was delicious. So I was like,
you hear that? The bass in the voice, she's like,
I was
come
like,
by.
This is delicious. And also, like, just tapping into my heritage felt like a very like personal thing. Like, I wanted there to be like a meaning to it. And so, yeah, I just started making them. I'm still making them. I feel like I'm kind of going through the research and development process and learning a lot around like what it means to start a food business. That's a whole nother space that like I don't know anything about, and going through food safety and, you know, forming relationships even in that space. Like, people are just so overwhelmingly positive in that space too. Like, you could reach out to like, you know, another ice cream restaurant owner, and like they'll just like answer right away and be like, I'm like here to help you, like extending the hand on the other side of the door, right?
I don't ever feel like it's a competition when it comes to food.
No,
it is a true creative space.
Yeah,
they want to see how you can take something and either make it better or give it a different context. And it's like no, please do.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing about the food space that it's so magnificent, is there's so many ways to cook some similar things, and sometimes it's just a culture twist, sometimes it's a flavor twist profile, sometimes it's the origin of what you're cooking it on. And people are just like, go, yeah, have fun. And
yeah. Or like, I don't know about you guys, but like what was interesting about my upbringing is like recipes would be written, like if they were written down at all, like they just have like a pinch of this, a dash of that, and you're like, what do I do with that? And it's like led by like intuition rather than like this step-by-step process, which I think is good for me, like to get like just loosen up and just like really explore the connection of creating something like physically. Like that's super cool. But also like I think the other thought, my brain was going in two different directions, but I was like, oh, you know, you could have the recipe, right? And like someone else could make it and it won't taste the same. It just never does. Mm-hmm. Like I've been trying to remake like my nani's chicken cutlets, and like my mom makes them a certain way, and like I make them and I'm like, what's wrong? Like what went wrong?
I will 100%.
Very different.
I will 100% stamp you on that, as I'm trying to build my cooking clout myself.
Yeah.
Literally, Mama T's like a dash of this, a pinch of that. And then, you know, she's like, you know, how to go on Powerpuff Girls, sugar, spice, and everything nice. And I'm just like, how did you do this? And then she's like, chemical X. I'm just like, damn it, my Mac sucks. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think, you know, I guess I'm just not so used to hearing, like, I'm glad you asked that. The creative space of like in cooking is so welcoming, because like as someone who's like, I'm just more going to be a consumer, you know, besides cooking at home, or like I would think that I would think like one shop would beef with another shop being like, nah, this is my block. you can't sell, because that's what it was like with the ice cream truck, man. They were like, hey, this is my radius, because it's going on in New York, but not here or there. They was battling for the turf.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's different though. That's a business selling goods comparative to a chef creating goods.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the toss up with when it comes to the food industry is like one is the consumer, right? And one is the producer. And the producer, it has all the creativity to come up with michelada ice cream, and you have all these different kinds, right? All these different flavors and things, but when you go to this one spot, there's another spot that's just like it, similar down the street, and they're not beefing and saying no, because they're allowing this creator to be creative. And so it's and that's, you know, food is my passion. So when you started talking about food, it touched.
Yeah, I was like, you're telling me about
my
that.
soul a little bit. And it's all about triggering that creativity. And you said you're an Italian. I worked in an Italian restaurant, Italian store / restaurant place in LA for a hot second. Do you know about Colombiana?
No.
So Colombiana is a cake. It's close to panna cotta.
Okay.
So it's similar.
Yeah.
So the Colombiana is just it means dove, I guess, in Italian.
Okay.
And so
She's like, nah.
The 4 years and still.
And no, I'm just curious because they were putting me up on game in this Italian place, and I didn't know nothing about it. I'm just serving this cake.
Yeah.
And they're like talking about it, like, oh, this is like a panna cake, and I was like, oh yeah. But to me, it goes back to what we're talking about when it comes to this creativity. It's similar to a cake in Russian, similar to a cake in Ukraine, similar to cake in Switzerland, similar to a cake in France, similar to a cake in like Sweden, similar to a cake in South America. And I'm just like, a lot of these things are the same. They're just culturally a little bit different. And I think that goes back to just a representation of us, right? Like a lot of us are the same, but culturally just a little bit different. And I think that's the beauty of cooking, to be honest. So
Yeah, just like what is the like slightly different take on that same thing. Or even just, that's like fascinating too, the fact that like it's a common through line across different cuisines. That's super cool.
So, and there's plenty of dishes. I think there's plenty of dishes out there that cross cultural lines, that we don't even recognize until you've had it in these different settings. And you're like, oh wait, isn't that this? And you're like, wait, yeah, wait, hold up, and then it begins to start making sense. And
yeah. Oh no, I was gonna even say like, no, keep going. I was like, sure? I lost the thought. Yeah, it was like, it'll come back someday.
Okay, so a couple questions, a couple more, just to wind this down because we're gonna tap out in a second. But one of the things to kind of like formulate and to really like put a nice little cherry on this is the puns.
Knee slap.
I'm just curious, what are you really wanting? I know you were saying that you're, still working out the various different things. Like, what are you wanting, and how do you want your dessert to touch people? Because dessert is such a beautiful process. It's ice cream. It's ice cream sandwiches. Like, what are you really hoping to get out of this business?
I want it to just be a space for people to enjoy a very humble dessert, just for the joy of it. Like, it doesn't have to be anything more than that. Just, you're in the same space as someone, you're holding something that's like aesthetically beautiful and texturally cool. That's it, really. Honestly, like, I don't think it has to be more complicated than that.
I respect that. And this gets me into my final question for you. Now, I got two of the best people to ask this because both of you are creatives. Now, I'm going to tell y'all a cheat code. And the cheat code, y'all can get on me. Small little story is, back in my heyday, one of my first date ideas is I would offer, let's go get dessert in like wine, where It's not dinner. It's not a walk in the park. It's a manageable, free expense, glass of wine, delicious dessert, all the things, right? I used to do that. And I think getting dessert is an awesome first date thing. So I'm curious because y'all are busy people, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, as creatives, while you're in the creative stages, do y'all think that dating is still possible? Or do you feel like you have to be more, all right, ice cream shop's up, boom, I'm doing this, now I'm available, or boom, hey, doing this, London 2025, we won the shit, now I got space to date? I'm just curious.
Wait, I'm confused on the question.
The question is,
being creatives.
As creatives,
yeah,
do you have to focus more on just being a creative? Can you be a creative and still date?
Yeah.
Or do you have to be so almost done with your baby so you have space?
No, I think that's the beauty of creativity. I think the beauty of creativity is allowing to take in things around you and advance your creativity, because that's what's going to help you be more creative. So being able to look at something and say, how can I change that? What about this makes this that? And how can I make this different? And getting perspective from somebody that maybe you're interested in gives you that opportunity to be more creative or challenge yourself in that creativity. And you have your right hand person to be like, how about this? Try this. How about this? Let's go here. How about this? And so now you have instant, because nowadays that's what we want. We want instant notification of what our idea is it good or not? And if that person is good for you, so most of the time they'll give you the correct they'll give you a honest answer, right? So I think in that creative space, finding someone that can really keep you creative, but also allow your creativity to be enhanced with their own creativity, I think is beautiful, because as a creative, everything is informative, or everything you can receive something from that and think about how I want to make this better and how I can enhance this or change that, or the lighting in this, or this food, that'd be great with this, or whatever the case may be. So
yeah, it's just like creativity is just ever evolving. We're ever evolving. It's very personal, but also like it's lovely to honor like that each dating experience is just very different, right? And like you have these different contexts, and that reinforms one thing over here to the other thing, and like that in itself, just the context of being like, oh, I was in this conversation here with this person and we created this thing, and that helped inform what I did here. It's like all about like, it's all feeding into like your experience as a human, like, and how you evolve and move through that. So yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Like I really like a lot of like what you're saying.
Thank you.
Very polite over there. I think for me, I've always just talked about it, and this is, and I'll close this out with this, is I just get like really tired of like hearing, like, don't get me wrong, like people have to heal and go through a process as, you go through the dating phase, but I just hear a lot of, people in our generation and younger really focus on, oh, I have to be this entity or this thing or accomplish this thing to, find and define partnership, when most of the times, one, you just have to be mentally healthy. You have to be able to have the space to bring someone in, because everyone's searching for this perfect container, and that doesn't exist. Where like I hear some dudes saying like, oh, if I'm this rich, then she'll never leave. Newsflash, in socioeconomic status doesn't change that. It's just changing the mindset of like, how can I enter this person no matter where I'm at in the creative state into my life, and how can we balance that? And just having a person, I love how you brought that to too as well, AJ, is just, can you compliment me? And I think we overlook, can this person compliment me for the microwave? This is easy. Like, having someone easily fit in sometimes doesn't always work, because just look how complex of things you were talking about today. How the complexity of things you were talking about. You want a person who's going to take the time, get their notebook. All right. Morning, she likes coffee when she wakes up. I'm gonna make sure she gets that helps her, right? Those small things equal out and equate to bigger implications in the future. This person sees me and they care, or they know that this is what I'm doing is very important. It's beyond just. So that's just my whole shtick.
Yeah.
But
the mindset's real.
No, I was like, what's one of my questions I wanted to ask, because everyone says like, I'm so busy, or I need to, you got to find the time. Mm-hmm. But I want to say this has been a creative show today. I will say this: the editing, I am not looking forward to. I'm not gonna lie. Internally, I've been rolling my eyes. I was like, no.
It's gonna be very creative.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be very creative. iMovie to the rescue. Aha.
Take it slow. Take it easy.
Thank you. I want to say thank you so much for taking your time, and just the grace and the genuality with your experiences and words on the show. I've been really appreciative, and got me thinking about a couple things differently. Yeah. So, I'm Cartier Rob, and I'm gonna have AJ, because he's not here so often. He's gonna ring us out.
I want to say thank you also for blessing us with your presence. You brought a different perspective, I think, that a lot of people needed to hear, but you also brought it emotionally, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things. We don't have a lot of ladies on the show, and so being able to tap into the emotional side that can trigger other people to really think outside the box has been dope. With that, this has been the Play No Games.
Wow. You're so out of practice. You forgot.
I did. Make sure you like.
Oh, wow. Dang, I got him back.
You did.
Where can they find you?
You can find me at, for my design business, I go under the name Notte Studio, NOTTE -studio.com. And that's where you'll find my like branding and design business. You can find me on Instagram through that. You could find me also at Zia's Ice Cream on Instagram. So yeah, I think I covered all the bases.
Hey, it's getting hot. We're gonna have to talk to Zia.
Man. Yeah, again, thank you. And make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you get the notifications. Woo. And I'm Arthur.
And I'm Rob.
And we out. Peace.
Yeah.
Probably wondering if I think of you. Sorry, I'm for the bag right now. Yeah, I'm for the bag right now. Yeah, for the bag that I never had. Yeah, you probably mad right now. Yeah, I got a 2-piece now. Shit, I think they call them groupies now.